Well, welcome back to another episode of the sequel, Return of the King. That was one I forgot last week that I realized was like my favorite, that I probably should have remembered.
You made a reference that I understood. I'm proud of you.
Welcome, even though you've never seen the trilogy.
None of them.
Wow. Everybody, you know what? Sometimes they say don't at me. I encourage you to at Brandon on this video and let him know that he should see those movies because they're amazing. So anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, though.
No, but there are a lot of great movies that the younger generation just needs to go back and
This
watch.
is true. This is true. Like Blank Check. Have you ever seen Blank Check?
No, I just figured all the movies today were just originals.
Have you seen Blank Check?
I've seen Blank Check, but that's not one I would have considered
Well,
a great one.
Blank Check is great. Let me just say. Anyway, today we're sitting down to talk about the message from Sunday. So before we dive in a little bit deeper, who would like to read our text from Sunday, and then we can dive in. I think you read last week. You want to read? You got your reading.
Yeah, you read last week. I'll read this
You
week.
got your reading
I do
glasses
have my
on,
reading
so you
glasses
can read
on today.
Okay.
So, starting in Luke 8, verse 40, it says, "Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was the ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, 'Who was it that touched me?' When all denied it, Peter said, 'Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me, for I perceived that power has gone out from me.' And when the woman had saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace.'" Thoughts?
I'll let you speak first, Brandon. I'm still pulling something up here.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've talked about this passage in the past, and just, an act of faith from this woman, of someone who has tried seemingly everything and has not had much luck, and just the faith to go and know that even touching Jesus on his robes would heal her, or would at least do something that would help her. Maybe she didn't know that it would heal her immediately. We do love that word, but she knew that something would happen.
Right.
And I'd love to turn over something you said with the robes that you had mentioned. I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah. You find it in Numbers that God the Father relays through, of course, his Moses and Aaron and those guys about that you would attach to the edges of your robe these tassels. And the intent was so you could remember the commandments of God. It was that you saw these things and it would remind you of, there are all kinds of things in life that you see that all of a sudden flash back certain things. And the intent was for those purposes. And of course, and then depending, it actually, you read in some other places that certain Pharisees would add extra tassels to look more holy than some of the other guys. And in that process, it was often considered that they looked like wings with feathers. And so I mentioned that in Malachi, it comes up that there's healing in his wings, in the Son of Righteousness. And of course, that being an allusion to Christ when it talks about the Son of Righteousness. So this woman obviously had some understanding of the Jewish scriptures to believe that just by touching the tassels, by touching the ends of his robe, that she might find healing. It is. We always think about the Southern gospel song. If I could just touch the hem of his garments, and And so you do kind of capture this idea, this sense of desperation, that she had the recognition of what was possible. And actually, by reaching out for those things, she's kind of saying, I remember the promises and the commandments of God. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because I was looking back and just thinking about, it says she could not be healed by anyone. And, going to the only one that can, do these signs and wonders that, and you mentioned, we were talking about a passage in Mark where, we were talking about how there were magicians and, these guys that could, think back to Exodus with the magicians with Pharaoh.
Right.
And, they could perform these signs that were not really, maybe power, but it just maybe tricks or it wasn't from God.
Right.
And so to have her realization, like you said, that only Jesus could do this and only could heal her, and then he leaves her with go in peace.
Right.
It's not just the physical battle of this discharge of blood, but this mental shame that she has worn for 12 years.
Yep.
And just saying, go in peace and don't go back to the way that you've been. So
Right.
That's the perfect image of Jesus.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I think on the other side of the coin, it's really interesting from a father's perspective to think about, here's this guy whose daughter is dying. He's coming to Jesus. As you pointed out, the amount of desperation we see in this passage from all parties involved. And I'm thinking about it even here now. I was thinking about it Sunday, but also sitting here now. If Lennon was in need of, she was basically just almost dead, and I was here I am going to Jesus, maybe not even fully understanding or grasping who Jesus even is in these moments, but there's this great crowd, and I'm frantic. I'm anxious because my daughter, whom I love, is dying, and yet here's this great crowd. The holdup, I'm trying to get to him, and then there's this healing that takes place with this other gal that takes his attention for a moment. And at the same time, I'm sitting here going, okay, all right, I gotta, can you please come? This whole thing.
Running out.
Exactly. And then somebody comes out of nowhere and is your daughter is dead. And just the emotion, even in that moment, the emotion of I can't even comprehend it. I don't want to comprehend it right now. And I know many people, unfortunately, have had to comprehend that feeling. But I feel whoever I thought Jesus was in that moment, if I was Jairus, I would have been really angry. I feel anger would have came over me towards this guy. You just healed this woman who just simply touched your garment, yet my daughter is back home and she's died. And I came to you, and again, I'm not trying to insert into the text here. I'm just thinking about this from a perspective of a parent of what I myself probably would have been feeling, But I love that Jesus says to him, Jesus hears this, your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. In that moment, Jesus says to him, it's all good. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid. Only believe, and she will be made well. And so I guess, and I admittedly, I had, with everything, as many Sundays go, I was popping in and out on Sunday. And so if you touched on this, I missed it. But right there, the only believe, and she will be made well. So there was a step of faith that this man had to take to believe that Jesus could heal her, and he would heal her. The only action other than getting to Jesus was this father, even after he's heard that she's dead. He came and she was dying, and here now he's learned from somebody that she's dead. And Jesus says to him, don't be afraid. Just believe. Like, since you believe that I can heal her and she'll be okay. Like, I just don't know how I would respond to that.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't really talk about the Jairus portion after the first part on Sunday. Just time restraints and getting all the context together. But what's interesting to me about the method of this is that, yes, Jairus comes in. It says a crowd was waiting for him, but you have to assume, and I don't want to read into the text, but you have to assume that when Jairus comes and Jesus is like, okay, let's go heal I'm going to go take care of your daughter, that the Jairus, again, as the leader of the synagogue, probably carried an entourage with him too. Yeah. And so the crowd doubles, or maybe even larger than that. I don't want to read too much into what we have in front of us. But Jairus brings his own crew with him. And so as they come around Jesus, there's probably an expedience to, we got to go deal with this. We got to go handle this. Yeah. And that is again, kind of one of the things I wanted to reference. I did reference on Sunday, but I wanted to even spend a little bit more time thinking about it personally, that Jesus was on the way to do ministry and he stopped and did ministry. It was, okay, this is where we're headed. We're going to take care of Jairus' daughter. But there was a need, an immediate need that came up. And I do think there's a great balance in this passage where after Jesus heals her, and you referenced that he told her to go in peace, but he calls her daughter. Yeah. And then who's he on the way to take care of? Jairus' daughter. Mm-hmm. And so again, I think there's a really cool balance in there, how there's a healing of this woman who has been an outcast, that he calls her daughter, to this child who probably wasn't an outcast because of who her father was. Right. And recognizing the daughter side of both of this, that Jesus is available for those who are the outcasts and for those who are I was going to say incast, but I don't think that's a word, but the in crowd, the popular people of that day. And I do think that in both passages we recognize that it is faith that heals, right? Because she reaches out and comes to him because she believes he can heal me, he can fix me. And then the same thing with Jairus, he goes because he believes that only Christ can fix this. And what's really cool too is that the person that shows up, the attendant that comes and says, "Don't bother the teacher." We've seen Jesus heal. We've heard Jesus' teachings. We've seen him do all kinds of cool miracles, and we're going to see some really cool ones coming up as we walk through the passage. But what we see is that, again, this limitation of who they think Jesus is. Mm-hmm. Remember, they can't quite grasp that he's really God. They're just like, oh, he's a great teacher. He can raise those who are lame. He can help those who are deaf. He can cast out demons. But I just don't think he can handle.
Well, I think that piggybacks what we talked about this morning in Mark. I mean, when Jesus literally says to them, like, well, who do people say I am? And like, oh, John the Baptist and, Elijah and all that stuff. And then he's like, who do you say I am? And even the thought of like what he's leading up to, which is what you're getting at as well, as we're about to step into, as we continue on in the book of Luke, things are just going to continue to turn up a notch, and so I that's what came to mind when you said that, was what we were reading in Mark this morning of Jesus flat out asking, who do you say I am? Yeah. So.
You can follow along in the book of Mark as well.
But same thing.
Yeah. But one of the things that I did want to just take a moment to kind of walk through, and I mentioned it Sunday, and I didn't go real far into it, but I wanted to bring up the different approaches that we have. First one being that Jairus came to him and fell at his feet, which obviously was a sign of respect. It was a sign of honor that he did that. But it was a very public experience, right? I mean, there's a crowd about him, and Jairus comes, which again, being a ruler of the synagogue, where the Jews were, at this point, some of the Jewish leadership was starting to turn against Jesus. To have him do that was really bold. It was really, really bold for him to come do that in a public setting, to fall down at the feet of Jesus. So for a moment, I want to pause there. I will come back to how she approaches him, but I see a challenge here for those of us that call ourselves followers of Christ. And how do we display our affections for Christ in public? How do we do that? I mean, I've got some answers, but how do we practice that in our daily lives? And I say that as not on a Sunday situation, but on a daily life situation.
Well, I think the way that I would answer this, I think, goes for both our daily lives and Sunday, because I think they are related.
Yeah, they should go hand in hand.
I think overall, we are far more concerned with our comfort and our the optics of us than we should be. Not to focus too much on Sunday, but you ask people, well, why don't you lift your hands in worship, or what, if you why don't we kneel down, or whatever, that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, I'm just not comfortable, And, again, I know that's maybe a little bit larger of a discussion, but I've heard people say that, and it's just, it makes me go, number one, well, I think Jesus is calling us to be a little bit uncomfortable, and, not to jump too much into it, but that's how I felt about 2020. I felt like there were so many people who, the end is nigh, and I was just like, and there were some things even within the church that did shake up a little bit through all of that, and it was like, no, I think Jesus just wants us to be a little bit more dependent on him and get a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's something we talk about. So
maybe become a little bit more undignified.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, David. But I think that's where my initial reaction is, just to say that we're comfortable. Like we're comfortable with our life, with the way that it flows, and myself included. I'm not casting stones or whatever dispersion to anyone other than pointing fingers at myself as well. Like, it's really, you've talked about, Brandon, having a heart for homeless people, and I can't tell you how many times I drive by where I walk into a gas station or something and there's somebody there, and I just mentally act like they're not even there, or I just make my own assumptions in my head as to why they're in that position or what it may be or whatnot. And so I get to where I'm going. I know where I'm going. I'm comfortable with what I am, and maybe I'm busy. I'm in a hurry. That would probably be the other thing, not to steal from any other answers, but I think comfort and busyness to me would be the first two things that come to mind in answer to that question.
Yeah, I was going to say busyness. One of my favorite illustrations is you take all the things in 24-hour day, and for students. For adults, it varies, but for us, which we work at a church, so it's a little, still work takes up a good portion of the day. You gotta eat, sleep.
Except for right now, you're not eating during lunch.
Right.
Because we're fasting.
We are fasting. But, you do sleep. Maybe sometimes as parents, you guys don't get as much, but, then you gotta run errands and I think we tend to...
Adulting.
Yes. We tend to leave Jesus as the last thing that we try to cram in.
Man.
When really, we should put everything around
Well, I think
that.
I'm guilty of doing that, even as making Jesus first thing in the morning, and then it's like, okay, I've checked that box for the day.
Yep.
I've got my Jesus fix. Now I can go on for the rest of my day. So I think I think we're guilty of doing it wherever we just kind of check that box. Okay, we've got this, we said, kind of thinking about the whole week, but even when we do that with Sunday, that's our hour 15, whatever, with Jesus.
Yep.
Maybe longer if we go to Sunday school, and then we go back to our normal life.
Yeah.
I
I think one of the things that, to tie that together.
Sorry to interrupt you, Brandon. I didn't.
Is the idea of Christ is not something we add to our lives, but he is our life.
Yeah.
And everything in our life should be shaped by that. Yes, we have the joy, the privilege, and sometimes the challenge of being church workers, however you want to put that. So we do have the ability to, we're working for Jesus. But everybody else should be too, no matter where they're working, no matter what they're doing. And we should be parenting, for Jesus.
Yeah.
We should be going to Hy-Vee for Jesus. It should be going to the gym, which you guys have made me look really bad. I put a lot of weight back on, and whatever. But the idea is that everything should revolve around Jesus. But what we've done is we've taken Jesus, and like you said, we just kind of give him the leftovers. We say, here you go. You can have the last portion of my day, the last portion of my life. And I think it's an important thing for us to be bold about our coming to Christ and be bold about who we are coming to for our help. When people go, oh, well, Christians are perfect, to be able to go, no, I'm not, but I go to the one who is. And Jairus being a leader in the synagogue, leader in the church, it would be like an elder of our church ran and fell before Jesus and said, heal my daughter, she's dying. And I would hope that they would do that anyway. But the reality is this guy was making sure that everybody, the crowd, knew Jesus is the answer. Now, real quick, because I can tell you have something. Before we go back to look at because I want to look at how the woman approaches him. I do want to recognize something that's really interesting is Jesus had just left from healing the demoniac, and they wanted him to leave, right? They were begging him, get out of here. Please go away. And the crowd in verse 40 welcomed him. And it's interesting to me the different approach to Jesus. That when Jesus did something that affected them financially, right? Because they lost their animals. When Jesus did something that made them uncomfortable, they were like, you got to get out of here. But when this crowd needed Jesus, they were all waiting for him. Man, they welcomed him.
I did want to real quick just go back to what y'all were talking about earlier, of the impatience and anger that Jairus may have experienced of just, it is easy to focus on ourselves before we minister to other people, of saying like, no, Lord, you got to fix this for me first, and then we'll go out and do this. But we're going to constantly face, go back to storms. We're going to constantly be facing things in our life. It's never going to get to a stop point, and then we go out like, our life is perfect now. We're going to still have stuff going on.
Yeah.
If you figure out perfect life, you let me know.
Yeah. But
we'll write a book and build a new building, my friend.
but we'll, as the people that we encounter on their way, we're not always promised another encounter with those type of people.
Yeah.
And so we gotta understand what the Spirit is leading us to do, and even if salvation doesn't come out of that, we're still called to take the opportunity that God gives us.
Look at you talking about the Holy Spirit.
How dare you?
Come on Sunday nights. We talked a lot about it.
I think though the interesting thing, and you've brought this up before, and I think it's such a key point, is you said there were people waiting because they were desperate for him. But were they desperate for Jesus, or were they desperate for Jesus to do something for them? Because I think there is a difference there.
It was definitely the latter.
I think so often we're desperate for something from Jesus, but we're not desperate for Jesus himself.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a clear distinction that we miss, because I think so often, yes, and Jesus has done the most amazing thing, literal life-changing, life-giving thing for us that no one else could ever do, and through his death, burial, and resurrection, and as I reference, I think every week, Ephesians 2, talks about we were dead, but because of Jesus and God being rich in mercy because of the love he had for us, we've been made alive with Christ, So obviously he did do something for us that's amazing. But I think so often we have this mentality of like, okay, this song is stuck in my head because my daughter's practicing it for a school concert, but like, we're going to tear off the roof to get to Jesus for healing and for something. But do we have that same mentality to just simply be with him? Like, and myself included, like, but it's just such a key thing that we miss is like, you think about like, Psalm 51 or 61, I think.
51.
No, I'm thinking of As the Deer.
Sorry.
Is it 163?
That's not a 163.
Not 163. Psalm 163. Anyway, I'll think of it. But the As the Deer pants for water, like having that, the desperation that we see there in that passage is not a desperation necessarily to get something from Jesus, but like my soul pants for you, like just for you, and like I just feel like we just miss that, and I don't know why. And even for myself, like, Jesus is like literally the only thing ever that will ever completely satisfy us, and then some. But yet we get so fixated on what he can give us other than just himself. Like, yeah, Psalm 42. Thank you. I knew it was in the Psalms. We were in the right
That's
book.
good.
There's so many good Psalms. It's just hard to remember. They all kind of, but I don't know. I that's just something that I'd like to talk about for a second if we can. Like the difference between the desperation of, because even we can look at Jairus and this woman. They're coming to Jesus because they need healing. They need something, and which is not like Jesus cares about our needs. Obviously, he's our provider, and will always provide. But like the desperation for needing something from Jesus and just needing Jesus, they are different. I mean, am I wrong?
No, there's definitely a difference. I pulled a song up because when you started talking about that, it's a song, Natalie Grant song called Healer. I'm not sure if you know that one.
I think I do.
I know she's not Shane and Shane, so or Phil Wickham.
She's OG though.
But it's the chorus of the song says this: "Help me want the healer more than the healing. Help me want the savior more than the saving. Help me want the giver more than the giving.
Yeah.
Help me want you, Jesus, more than anything." And I do think that based on our current, it's probably not just current, but based on our culture, there is a expectation that we like people who do things for us, right? Yeah. I mean, think about it for a moment. Think about with your own kids. Your kids are happier when you're giving them what they want, right? They still love you.
Yeah.
They may tell you they don't, because kids are mean like that sometimes. Mine have done that. So, but the idea that we believe that God should be like us, right? So that if we want our kids to like us, then we need to give them the things they want.
Yeah.
And so we have that same mentality, which causes us to be really selfish, really self-centered. Brandon, you mentioned that earlier, that we have the tendency to be self-centered and focused on ourselves. I think that's the reason that we struggle with understanding the difference between being desperate for Christ and being desperate for what he can give us. Because we care so much about what he can give us, right? It is a cultural thing. Give me, me. To quote the great theologian Toby Keith, may he rest in peace. I want to talk about me, mine. I'm number one, right? And so I think that really is the struggle, because we idolize self more than we worship Christ. And so there is a lack of desperation. Do I have an answer for us on how to change that? Man, I really don't, and I wish I did.
Well, I think Brandon alluded to it a little bit ago. I mean, I think it's full reliance on the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit's not going to lead us to ourselves. I mean, he just won't.
Unless he wants us to remove stuff. Scalpel it.
Well, then we'll just ignore that, though, because we don't want to get rid of, Oh, you got any thoughts on that, Brandon?
If I can, I just wanted to put this out here just as a testament to just what can happen when you do put yourself in an uncomfortable position. But member from our church and I, we went out this past weekend downtown and just sat and just had conversations with people. And for me, that's terrifying, and for him, also terrifying. But we, 9 o'clock at night, didn't have like salvations, but to be available. And one of the things that someone said was, it just sticks with me. One of the ladies that we talked to, she was there for most of our time sitting there, but she said, for most of my life, I have had the perception that I'm not welcome at church. And in the hour that I've been able to talk with you, and you didn't say that gracefully, but she said, in the hour that I've been here, I have seen what Christians are talking about when they say that God truly does love everyone, and that would seek Him, and just to be a picture of Jesus in that moment of not worrying about what she looks like, what was going on in her life, but to be just available and able to pray over her and speak life. I mean, that's what Jesus is trying to show to people.
Yeah.
And so just, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but I think it's important to not be worried about the exterior busyness or the, she's scary and under the influence. I'm not going to talk to her. But just having conversations. I think that's...
I actually think that kind of helps us run into the woman with the blood issue, because she definitely didn't feel welcomed.
No.
Right. I mean, she was not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
By cultural standards, by ceremonial cleanliness, she was not supposed to be there.
Can I interject really quick? So that is one part. So on the show that I often reference in some positive ways at times, and other times, trying to point people back to Scripture. But that is one really cool thing in the episode of The Chosen, where this scene takes place, is you see, leading up to this, how this woman has been like just completely ostracized, and how people will not associate with her when they realize her situation and that she's unclean, and I just think it's so it's, and I'll be quiet so you can finish, but I think talking with what you said, I think it's so easy for us to forget that we were once unclean, that we were once dead, that we were once apart from Jesus, that there was nothing good in us, and that the only thing good in us now, as Wade likes to say, is Christ. And so it's really easy for us, for some reason, once we're good, then we just, for some reason, look around at everywhere else who doesn't have that. Even some people that do, we still look at that and go, well, they're living their life in sin, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, yeah, you were too and are too, D2. Wait,
Jay, are you saying that sin is not just on the outside?
I know, groundbreaking thought, but anyway, so I think it's so I said all that to say that I think that The Chosen has a really great depiction of what that looks like, and I think piggybacking that I think we can put ourselves in this woman's place of knowing that at some point in time, if we've truly given ourselves to Jesus, that we had that same desperation for healing. And maybe in many cases, I mean, I talked to a lot of guys who they've tried a lot of different places to find healing and to find acceptance and to find, whatever. But, they've only found it in Christ. So anyway, that's the setup to please continue, Pastor.
I just was going back to the idea that she wasn't welcome. I mean, whether it was ceremonial or whatever, she was cut off. And you talk about this woman who felt like she would be unwelcome in church. It's a sad thing for people to feel like they could not be welcomed in a church, whether they live in sin or whether they live a alternative lifestyle or whatever it is. They should always feel welcomed, whether they choose to turn from their sin or not. That's between them and Jesus.
Right.
And but someone should always feel welcomed and feel allowed to be here. But
Yeah.
it's interesting that the way she approaches, because she has felt unwelcome, because she knows that she, if she was to yell right then, unclean, the crowd would part. And all of a sudden, every eye would be focused on her.
Yep.
There's a sense of shame that she carries, but also the sense of desperation, right? Because she has to get there. She knows that she spent all of her money. And it is interesting to see that she spent all of her savings or all that she'd ever earned, considering she probably hadn't been able to have a job in 12 years. Right? So it's not like she's rolling in her 401k is just growing and her IRA is booming and all those things that Gary Collins could tell you about that I can't. But this is the reality of who she is. She's in a desperate place. And Jay, you made a great reference there. I know you love Ephesians 2, but rolling even further into that, it says that we were separated from Christ,
Right.
alienated
Right.
from Him, that we were cut off. And so these are the ideas that this woman was cut off. She was separated from everybody else. And now here in Christ, she's made whole. Man, that's the gospel.
Yeah.
Is it not that we've been cut off? Now through Christ, she can be made whole. And I do, and you mentioned it earlier, and I love the fact that at the very end of this passage, which again we didn't tackle all the Jairus stuff on Sunday, but at the very end of the 48, before it rolls into the rest of Jairus' story, go in peace.
Yep.
Go in peace. This woman had not known peace for at least 12 years. You know what I mean? She's worried, she's battling, she's struggling physically, and you know when your physical health is just shot, that your emotional health is shot, your mental health is shot, and your spiritual life is just falling apart when you don't take care of yourself. And this is what she's living in. And Jesus calls her daughter, and it says, go in peace.
Yeah.
Man, that would have, I know for me, in that moment, I would have been wrecked. Like, it would have just wrecked me to my core. And I think the thing that kind of gets me about that is that people that have, I think there's a common thing now for people that have been redeemed or saved to really think that they're not wrecked. And that's just my opinion.
I've arrived.
That it's, I've made it now. I'm good, instead of being broken over sin. And this woman, we don't read that this all happened to her because of sin, and that would have been a cultural thought. But just to see that she was told, go in peace. And I guarantee she slept better that night than she'd slept in 12 years, or maybe her whole life.
Yeah.
Or maybe she didn't sleep at all because she was so excited to be around people again. But there's just this has been a passage that I've loved for years. I don't read a whole lot of passages that I hate, but this is one I've loved for years, just because of the desperation that comes from it, but also just the different approaches from Jairus and from the woman, and then even the crowd.
So I kind of like to, as we kind of close things off here and shut things down, however you want to say, wrap things up here. I'm gonna kind of do a shameless plug, but I hope it ties in. So bear with me. But one response that stuck out to me here is in verse 47. It says, when the woman saw that she was discovered, she came trembling and fell down before him. In the presence of all the people, she declared the reason she had touched him and how she was instantly cured. To me, that reminds me and puts me in the mind of someone who is just falling at the feet of Jesus in awe and in reverence of who he is. Yes, in this instance of what he's done for her, and I think that's okay for us at times to be, really, most of our life, should be in awe of what Jesus has done for us, because as we have said, as we've seen in Scripture, who we were, but God, and now who we are because of Jesus, right? This posture of trembling and reverence and falling before, that's the goal of our Fourth Fridays. Really, it's the goal of our Sunday services as well, but specifically, the tagline of Fourth Friday in my head, and I've shared with a few people, is to just get comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable, and so I would just like to, if I can, extend an invitation, because we have one coming up in 2 days, 7:00 here at the church. To invite you to come. As we've said many, many different times, worship is not just music. Worship does not just happen at the church, but coming with a heart to sing and rejoice and to praise and to be reverent in awe of who Jesus is. Yes, what he's done for us, but even just simply who he is. That's my prayer for this week. For every time we do this, for every Sunday, but for Friday night especially. I know we have a lot of people who have walked through and are still walking through seasons of sickness, people who have been grieving, who have had all sorts of stuff going on, who are in the middle of a semester of school. Some people who are just, life is going well. Wherever you are, I just invite you to join us on Friday night, to do just that, to be in awe of who Jesus is, to thank him for what he's done, for us, for who he is, but just to give praise to him because he's the only one who deserves it. That would be my hope, and as a sending out here is just to invite you to that. You guys are obviously invited as well, to come with, and even before then, even today, find time to get alone with the Father, to spend time with Jesus with fear and trembling, just because of who he is. That would be my encouragement to all of us. Oh, you guys got anything to add to that?
No, I think you preaching anytime soon? No, that was good, Jay. Thank you. I think it is one thing to read something I shared with y'all today about it's one thing to witness and to go out and do that, but we're called to be witnesses. And so it's not just an act that we plan and we go out and do it. That's great, but it is living daily as a witness to what God has done in our lives. So I'm definitely excited for Fourth Friday. I'm excited for just getting to celebrate Easter in a few weeks and just being able to have a service that we recognize, Jesus' power over death and the grave, and something we recognize every day, but hopefully, just to not incorporate it into our life, but let it be our life. And let Jesus guide us.
Sure.
I had one more thing I wanted to talk about real quick.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's in the version of this in Mark. It's in verse, I believe, 33. It says that she came before him and told him the whole truth. I just love the way that word's worded there, the whole truth, because this is I think, and it's just I know we're running long on time, and we've all got other appointments and stuff that we need to be at. But I just think it's really cool that she goes to him and says the whole truth. And I say that because I believe that a lot of times when we go to God in prayer, sometimes we fluff it instead of just being like, God, I don't like this.
Yeah.
God, this is my problem. God, that person's getting on my nerves. God, why are people hating me? Why are people doing this? Instead of going just straight to God, no punches pulled, and just saying the whole thing. And He's God. So why are we not doing that?
Yeah.
We could spend a whole another hour talking about prayer and our propensity to fake it until we make it, but just being real in that moment in conversation with God, it's just mind-blowing.
100%.
What happens when you do that? So, but
You said it on Sunday. He knows us anyway. So
Yeah.
why would we try to keep anything from him?
He knows all your nooks and crannies.
He knows my name.
Ooh, good callback.
I'll let you sing. So,
Well, I apologize, Pastor, for not letting you get your final word in there before we moved on. I knew we were wrapping up here because of time. But well, thank you again, gentlemen, for sitting down. And thank you for joining us. And like I said, we look forward to maybe seeing you Friday night, but for sure on Sunday morning joining us here at the church. Have a great rest of your week, and just live in awe of who Jesus is. Have a great week.